Hello everyone, this is Aaron from the Whirly Bugger, bringing you our quarantine fly tying series here. I've got a squalla pattern we're going to start with. This is the junk in your trunk squalla. This is a great fly here for the Yakima. Real nice low profile on it, floats really well, and the visibility is also very good on it. Okay, we're going to start tying this fly. So the hook that we're using is a size 8 2X hopper hook. I've taken and put about a 30-degree bend in it with a pair of pliers. You can get this hook with the bend already in it, but I had some extra of these around, so I just went ahead and bent it myself. So we're going to start with some olive 8/0 Vivus thread here, and we're going to put down a nice foundation to start this fly. We're going to go all the way back pretty far into the gap of the hook. Go about 1/8 of an inch from the bend of the hook there. Keep working on this to cover the whole hook up here so you got a good foundation. Alright, so we got there. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take some black Hare's ice dub. We're going to form a nice ball for the egg sac of this squalla here. You want to try to dub this on your thread pretty thin. You can always add more if need be, so start kind of thin and keep it fairly thin. Kind of make some crosses over the top of this just to kind of secure it. That way when you do hook a fish on this, it doesn't tear the dubbing ball up. Once you've got that, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of these fine brown rubber legs here. I'm going to go ahead and tie that in. This ball is going to kind of splay these out, so you don't have to worry about getting it super perfect. You can trim, just kind of get it straight as you can. So that's our next step there. Just get this wrapped down nice and good here. Now we're going to take some of the SLF Squirrel Dub Olive Spiky. I'm going to lay down some of that. Same thing, you want this body profile on the underside of this fly to be fairly thin, not super bulky. We're going to go up to about where the bend is in the hook that I put in, and that's about midway. Put a little more on here just to even everything out and make it so it's consistent on the body here. So we got the back half of the body. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some of this brown 2mm, actually it's tan 2mm foam here. I'm going to cut about an 1/8 inch strip here. You don't need this to be super crazy wide. Put a little arrow in the top of it and tie it in just above the end of the hook towards the front. Get it secured in here really good. So we're going to kind of try to we're going to segment this body with this foam. We want to try to keep the segmentation nice and even. We go all the way back to that egg sac. So you should have 4 to 5 segments right in there. There's no exact number, just kind of when you get to the egg sac, we're going to pull up on this foam, trim it off. We'll just kind of trim off these little tabs after that. So now you've got this nice segmented piece of foam in here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some gray dubbing to enhance the segmentation of this fly even a little bit further and give this fly a little bit of contrast so it's not just a one-dimensional fly. So we got some gray SLF squirrel dub for this. This doesn't need to be thick. It's really super thin. The finer you can dub this on, the better. You don't need a lot. Basically you're just going to go back over the segments that you made with this so you have contrast to the body of this fly. So do 2 wraps per section. And we'll go ahead and finish off here in the middle with that. So next step is we're going to take some brown crystal flash. You don't need a lot of this, 6 to 8 strands, because you're going to fold this over when you tie it in, so you're going to get double that. Little flash is good. You don't necessarily need to overdo it. I've kind of chosen this little bit darker color because a lot of times we're fishing in the sun here and we don't need something super crazy bright. So I'm going to go ahead and tie that in. I'm going to cut that off right about a 1/2 inch beyond the egg sac of this fly. So looks about like that. Next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to get some of this all-purpose deer hair. I'm going to take about a pencil, about the size of a pencil of hair, clean out all this guard fur. I'm going to go ahead and stack this. You don't want to overdo this wing. It'll make your body too bulky. So squallows don't have ginormous wings, so you don't have to make it overkill. So now we got all of our tips even here. So we want to match that pretty much up with our brown crystal flash that we put in there. Go ahead and hold on to that. We want to take just a couple of wraps. We don't want to crank down. We're just going to kind of go forward towards the eye, and then once you get up here a little bit further, go ahead and start putting some tension on it and get her bound in there good. And then as we go back, we'll start to put a little bit more tension on this. That way you're not going to have a big gnarly bushy wing. It's going to kind of keep that nice profile that you're looking for. So like that. And we're going to take and we're going to just trim all this excess off here. Okay, so we're going to finish securing this down. get this tight so that when you do catch fish with this, like I was saying, this body don't move around. You don't want it to shift back and forth. You want to get multiple fish on one fly, so securing it down here pretty good. So the important thing is kind of make sure that your eye of your hook doesn't have a bunch of hair over the top of it, and it's important to kind of, with any fly, not only this one, to make sure that you're not crowding the eye of the hook, so when you go to finish this fly off, you can do so, because there's a fair amount of stuff on this fly, so you don't want to overdo it. If that wing does splay out, I need to take a couple of loose wraps kind of further back on the hook there to get that nice slender profile on that wing. Don't worry too much about the legs. They're going to shift around when you're tying this fly. You can adjust them when you're done and cut them to length. So we got the wing in there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to reverse these colors. Same two colors. The only difference is we're going to take a gray on the top half of the body and then do a green segmentation with it. So we're going to bring that right up to the eye of the hook. Same deal. You don't have to get super carried away with this. You got a pretty good body because of the deer hair, so just basically want enough just to cover up the thread. And this is going to give this thing a nice two-tone appearance, so it's kind of what we're shooting for, something with a little bit of contrast. Alright, so we've got that down. You don't have to get super carried away because you're going to kind of cover this again as you come up the body. So bring the thread back basically where that wing ended. Now we're going to take another piece of tan foam here. This one don't have to be super long. Same thing, about an 1/8 inch. You don't need to cut the arrows in this, so I just kind of put this piece on. It's way too long, but I'll trim it, but makes it a lot easier to hold on to. So we'll go ahead and start right there, and don't get too carried away. Just kind of get it secured in place. You don't need to get her tightened down yet because we're going to put another piece of foam on top of this. So this is kind of a natural colored fly, so I'm going to put a little bit smaller, brighter piece of foam in here. I'm going to use green. Whatever color works for you that you can see on the water well, that's what I suggest you use for your cider. Basically is what this is, your cider on the fly. This fly sits super low in the water, so pick out a color that's good for you, and I'd recommend a couple of different colors for the different lights that you're gonna be in out on the river. So we got basically these two pieces of foam sitting here. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take our fine brown rubber legs here. We're gonna peel these apart, get a couple out here. I'll do this from both sides here, so I'll start on my side. Don't worry if you get a few deer hairs out of place. Like I said, you can trim this fly up when you're done and make it nice and pretty. So we'll just go ahead and get these in here, and I like to try to kind of keep these up on the foam if I can. That way you can get them kind of secured in there pretty good. Now you want to put some little more attention to this. So okay, so we're here. We reverse these colors. We've got the green, or excuse me, the gray in the top half. So we're gonna go ahead and take the opposite color that we were using on the back. So we got gray. So we're gonna go ahead and take a green. It's gonna kind of just set this fly off just a little bit, so something that the fish probably aren't seeing routinely. And you don't need a lot of this, we just need enough to basically cover this first segment of thread here. So we're gonna take about 3 wraps, and we're gonna just jump this forward about half of the distance between where you are and the eye of the hook. So I'm gonna go ahead and take another wrap completely over the top of this foam. We want to try to keep this pretty proportional here, so get her secured in here good. So we got our second here. So in my opinion, this next step is kind of the hardest part of this fly, and what I figured out that works well when I'm tying this is same fine brown rubber leg for the antenna, but leave it just a little bit longer, because basically you're going to capture it in the front part of the second wrap on this foam here. So leave it pretty long, and I'll just kind of take, and you want to make sure you don't get outside of you want to make sure you don't get outside of that segment. You don't want a bunch of funky looking segments on your fly. So I'll use those legs to kind of pull that thread. Okay, so we got this antenna in, which is kind of tricky to get these in place, but you know, like I said, make sure when you're putting it in, you kind of use the actual rubber leg to manipulate the thread so it stays in the segmentation you made. And then once you get it in there, just go ahead and give it a couple of good wraps, and just kind of, you want these laying straight forward. You're going to put another little segment in front of this, so that's going to secure those in pretty good. You want to make sure that they're, you know, laying straight so they're not off to one side. And then the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and take another bit of green dubbing and cover up that thread wrap and that segment that we made. So just a little tiny bit of dubbing here, basically just to cover up the thread and clean the fly up a bit here. So, and it may be hard to see, but this dubbing is really not super bulky. It's pretty thin dub. So like I said, we're just trying to cover up the thread. So we're going to go ahead and bump just a touch forward. We're going to make our final little segment here, and just going to kind of secure these antennae in and make this fly pretty bulletproof. You don't want to go super hard with the thread. You want to get the body down secure, but you don't want to go so hard that you cut through the foam. We'll go ahead and take our final little bit of dubbing here. So we're going to finish this fly on the underside here. So when I was telling you earlier you didn't want to crowd this eye, this is why, because we're going to finish this fly off underneath here. So go ahead and grab my whip finisher here, and we'll whip finish this off, and we'll tweak all the legs and stuff once we do that. You want to make sure when you're finishing this fly off that you don't trap your legs in here. I'm going to make, I don't know, 6-8 little wraps on this with the whip finisher here. That'll be enough to keep everything together. So go ahead and cut that off. So now we're gonna kind of go through and trim everything up. So we're gonna start with this tan foam here, and you want to leave, oh, I don't know, a 1/4 inch probably. So just go ahead and cut that straight. These antennae, we want to leave them a little long, give this thing a little bit of movement and life on the water. Same with the back. We're gonna take a little bit of that, and this top piece of green foam here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of cut this from both sides and make it as even as possible. Just be careful when you're doing this so you don't chop off your legs or your antenna and wreck your fly. So I'm doing that in the front and the back, so basically just taking and see, you're looking like this now. Same with the tan foam. You know, I'm going to snip these little corners off so you don't have a straight corner. So you don't have to be as aggressive on the angle as just take the corners off so they're not sharp. And this piece of foam's pretty nice because this will actually make that squall skate on the water if you want to fish this thing with a little bit of twitch or movement. And I'm trying to keep everything kind of symmetrical on the fly. So last few things we're going to do is the legs and the tail here. So on these legs, they don't need to be this long. You want them probably 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, and I always like to leave my back legs just a touch longer than my front. You want to make sure that when you're cutting these, you leave them long enough, but you don't want them to where, you know, when you're fishing this thing, they're fouling up in the hook. So we're going to cut these probably at about I'd say 1 inch. So we're basically, and then you can take and tweak these legs and kind of get them where you want them. And then on this tail, you know, I kind of, once I get to this step, you can kind of mess with this thing until you get them exactly where you want them. The fish ain't gonna really care that much. It's just more of a personal preference to kind of get them where I want them. So this fly is complete. This is what the fly looks like from the underside. So it's got that nice bend in it. So the back half of that fly sits down in the water. Front half is what's floating and what you see. You can look at your wing if you got some, you know, little errant fibers of deer hair here. You just take and trim those out. So this is the completed fly. Junk in your trunk, Skwalla.